Godolphin's James Cummings joins us on Sky Thoroughbred Central. James, this is a pleasant office to work out of every day.
It is, Ray, yeah. Thanks for coming out, and it'll be enjoyable to talk you through some of our autumn carnival aspirants.
We'll look forward to it because there's a number of them are stabled here, but you also have the stable at Warwick Farm, which is predominantly your 2-year-olds?
Yeah, we do, and we don't have a huge number of horses in there training at the moment, but there's a couple of very interesting horses that are on the way through, and all of our 2-year-olds will go through our Warwick Farm base to get a good education and set themselves up for their future. And a few of those have graduated to here at Osborne Park already.
I'll come to the 2-year-olds a little later because Osborne Park is where all the star boarders are, so to speak, and Broadsiding, who we did some amazing things in 2024. How's he coming along for the autumn?
Yeah, he's really well. He's been extremely forward in his work. He's been up and about, feeling good. And we'll head into the autumn carnival. I think off a longer break than he had going into the spring, where he was campaigned long into the winter in Queensland. So that's going to be interesting, having that longer time. But I think you'll see him as soon as next month. I think we'll run the horse in the Hobartville first up, and I think he's just getting there nicely towards that race without getting carried away just yet. But quite pleased with what we're seeing from him, and he's really settling into his work beautifully.
Physically, has he made much changes from the colt we saw in the spring?
He's a little bit more defined as he matures, but he was a precocious young horse, Australia's champion 2-year-old, and he's kept a quite nice level. But I like the way he just toned up a little bit more this time in, and I think it helps him a lot being forward and on the bridle and feeling good about himself. To be ready to go relatively soon in his campaign.
He did win the Golden Rose first up last spring, beat Traffic Warden, a James Cummings 1-2. That gave you a lot of satisfaction, but I think that day made a lot of people sit up and take notice that Broadsiding is the real deal. Yeah,
he's certainly managed to go right on with his 2-year-old career by doing so, and that's a really critical thing with a horse like him, who has the potential to really train on even as an older horse. So whilst we continue to see improvement from him from one prep to the next, that keeps that hope alive, and I think that's going to be a critical thing about him in the autumn. He'll see a few more tracks with some cut in the ground. You tend to get reliably at least a few runs on wet tracks this time of the year, and he's going to relish that, because we saw him his very impressive effort on wet tracks in the autumn 12, back in April last year. So that's going to be a real opportunity for Broadsiding. But even without that, I think the win in the Golden Rose showed that he's one of the best 3-year-olds of his generation, and he gets the chance this campaign to continue that trend.
I'll ask you about his campaign or your plans for him in autumn for a second, but if I can just labour on his spring a little. He's 4th in the Caulfield Guineas after the Golden Rose. I think everyone realised that the horse had legitimate excuses. He's run in the Cox Plate to finish 3rd to Via Sistina, who some argue is top 3 in the world. Prognosis, Broadsiding was right alongside an outstanding Japanese horse. Again, that run just underlined his quality.
It did, and it's the greatest thing we can do with a promising horse, is to test them at weight for age, and to have had his merits tested not just at weight for age in Melbourne, but taking that through a world-class form line is high praise for him. He's going to be a better horse if he sees them again. You can imagine 12 months later. But he did battle with them. He beat the best of the rest Australian contingent, and placing in a Cox Plate as a 3-year-old in the spring is a great testament to his ability, his fortitude, and his potential. Yeah. Because there's so much that could be ahead of him, and it'll start for that horse next month, the kick off to his preparation, but we're waiting with bated breath that potentially might be able to reveal again this time in, and they're the sort of signs that we look for when we decide whether a horse that could be a champion 2-year-old is worthy of being trained on at 4, and we might even be able to get a peek a little bit more what might be under the hood. So that's the type of excitement we're looking for, and we're relishing having him back in training because he's such a high class colt.
Group 1 winner at 2, a Group 1 winner as a spring 3-year-old, a Cox Plate place getter. You've mentioned earlier you're looking at the Hobart Full as his comeback run. There's a lot of similarities with Animo there.
Yeah, there are, and yet he's not Animo. He's very different to that horse. But there are similarities, and that you can at least see the way we've tested the horse, the opinion that we have of him, and he'll continue to prove himself, which is what we've got to look forward to. But the races keep getting stronger, and there are more variables. There's a greater number of the 3-year-old population will start. They'll start filling up the ranks of these races, and he'll get his opportunity to fend them off. But that's why they've got to be tested. They've got to keep on turning up to do it, prep in and prep out, and the best of them can do that. And we're therefore looking forward to seeing whether how he goes about taking the next step to do so.
All going well, Hobart Full first up. Will you follow the traditional path, the Randwick Guineas, the Rosehill Guineas, and then, dare I say, maybe a Queen Elizabeth Stakes?
Yeah, I think we'll follow the traditional path with him. Whether or not we head to the Queen Elizabeth Stakes, this prep with him remains to be seen. We might even venture up to Queensland again with the horse, a race like the Doomben Cup. But I just like the way he's coming along at the moment. We'll stick to his traditional path, keep him to the 3-year-olds at the moment. And we'll, we might test him one more time against the older horses before we make our decision whether we train on with Broadsiding. And so far, his preparation is sailing along beautifully.
Fantastic. Traffic Warden, who was so brave running second to Broadsiding in the Golden Rose, you thought enough of him to accept with him in the Everest as a 3-year-old for Godolphin. What happened that day at the barriers?
It was just a catastrophe of errors for Traffic Warden. There was some horses were playing up either side of him, and he was already quite fresh and full of himself. He'd had an extra week in the lead up to that race than most of his opposition, and just not having had that run 2 weeks before probably got him a little bit too fresh. He would have been pretty hard to beat in the Premier 2 weeks beforehand. He was one of the picks of the yard, but he stormed out of the yard feeling so well, and when it all boiled down to it, he just got a bit above himself and got his leg up over the barriers. And most horses will get withdrawn under those circumstances, and so we've accepted the decision and we've moved on. But he was certainly going to be ready to run a race from an ideal barrier, and we had to rue what might have been. And nevertheless, he's fine. He's pulled up fine from his spring campaign. He's a Run to the Rose winner, and winners of that race historically train on to be very good and capable horses, even against our older opposition. So we've got to push on fearlessly with him, and we're programming him with the horses. His ability in the highest regard. It's the way we view Traffic Warden, and I think he can be a real force this campaign. We're just going to pick the right races to go through to get to where we need to get to, and it's quite likely that he'll end up in a Newmarket, and we're looking forward to seeing him there race like the Newmarket lightweight. And give him his opportunity to demonstrate his sprinting prowess.
Which we certainly know he's got a lot of. Just on Everest Day, I was actually standing close to you when the incident happened. You were next to your wife, Monica. I know racing's a roller coaster. I know you've got to accept the highs and the lows in this sport. But you walked away quite calm and measured that day. Underneath, I dare say you were boiling. But how did you keep a lid on it? And is it easy as it to say that's racing? Or?
Well, look, on one hand it is. You just need to accept things. From the perspective of the horse trainers, we can only get our horses as perfect as we can get them on the big day. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. There's hundreds of times where you've got to deal with disappointment, or things coming from left field that you can't control. There's factors out there that we've learned to live with. So, I think we do tend to move on pretty quickly, and no amount of jumping up and down was going to help the situation. So just give us an opportunity to, reflect on what goes on. We pay attention to the horse, what changes, what we might need to make, and we strategise from there, really. But I think from my perspective, the horse's welfare is more important than just whatever happens on one particular day, and that's the regard we've got Traffic Warden in. He'll get his opportunity, and his day will come, and what he's done already would be enough to put him on any roster anywhere in the country. And I have a suspicion that Darley's already quite interested to stand Traffic Warden, even if we were to retire him tomorrow, because he's been so impressive on the way through. But he's nevertheless still got a job to do in my eyes, and we're campaigning him aggressively to attempt to get not only a Group 1 next to his name, but just to keep elevating his reputation, because he's a very talented sprinter, and he will most certainly get his opportunity to live to fight another day. And it's the great thrill of racing to see whether or not he's able to get it done on the day that it counts.
Exactly. His Group 1 place is a 2-year-old at 1400 in a size, but you think he's essentially a sprinter?
Well, I think so, and he's returned sharp. He's got a sprinter's disposition, and he's got a sprinter's pedigree. But I think if I really set my mind to it, he could probably be stretched out to a mile. But I just like the way he's coming along from what I've seen in the horse in the mornings, and from what I've seen in his career so far, that the targeting that new market the way we have with 3-year-olds in the past is going to be rewarding for Traffic Warden, and he might even be able to come back to Sydney, be very competitive in sprint races in Sydney. I think the Arrowfield's building in status. Whether or not he's able to run there, time will tell. But that can be a great bridge to getting up to Brisbane, and there's a prospect of even being a Stradbroke horse, and there's another beautiful race for him along the way. So there are all options for him, and there's of course the carrot at the end of the year about whether or not the horse stays in training for the Everest. And I'm sure that 12 months down the track he'd be a more seasoned campaigner to be ready for the big stage like that if he wasn't quite ready for it as a 3-year-old.
Given the international pedigrees of both Broadsiding and Traffic Warden, if they were to live up to expectations in autumn, any chance either going to Royal Ascot?
Yeah, there is a chance, and we'd look at that. I'd say more so Traffic Warden than Broadsiding, just given the types of horses that they both are. But I think either horse would be competitive on the stage there if we had the ambition to take them to Royal Ascot. But look, we didn't take Animo, so I think if we're not going to take Animo, it's going to be rather unlikely that we'd take either of those two.
Yeah. How would he have gone Animo?
I think he would have proved pretty hard to beat in that race. So, but look, it's a good opportunity for horses to go to Europe, and if they miss, they miss. It's a really difficult thing for one of our horses to travel all that way. And whilst we see every year international horses do it the other way around, they're far more used to the travel than our horses, and there's not too much really lost if you paid too much attention to what happened in the yearling sales this week with a first season sire like Home Affairs. You can see that a failure at Royal Ascot doesn't dent the reputation of any young stallion.
Golden Mile is coming on now down the middle of the track, and Bankmore from a long way back. Golden Mile up to Tijuana, then Elliptical. Golden Mile, 100 metres to go from Tijuana. Elliptical late. Golden Mile, Elliptical's driving. Golden Mile, soar out the mile, won the Guineas.
You mentioned those two outstanding 3-year-olds. A couple of older horses I'm really interested in, including a comeback horse, Golden Mile. It didn't work out for him at stud. He's been gelded now. If you go back through his form, he's a legitimate Group 1 horse who's got the ability up to probably 1600 metres be competitive at a very high level.
Yeah, he does. He's going to be a really interesting horse coming back. He's enjoyed that. He's enjoyed that full break. He's never really had that. He's always butted up in every carnival of Golden Mile, and he's gone close in a few big races since his 3-year-old, since his win in the Caulfield Guineas. I love the way he was. I love the way he was able to fight on hard and just be beaten in the Epsom. He's put up a number of big runs. He looked the winner in the George Ryder, and these are all runs that are pretty close to being retired. You know, at the very end of his prep. Now that he's had that good break, he's enjoyed a few other experiences that might, change his mindset on on a few things. But we've had to have him gelded to bring him back into work, and I think he might have something to offer. But he'll be a project of ours. Yeah. He's a lovely sound horse who's thriving and being back in work, and I'm sure that he's really enjoying the benefit of that good break that he had.
He could be a good weight for age horse come autumn, Golden Mile. Zardozi didn't win in 7 starts last spring, but she didn't run a bad race at all. Ran second in a Metropolitan, just beaten in a controversial photo. 2 outstanding fourths in a Caulfield Cup and a Melbourne Cup. How is she coming up after her Cups campaign last spring, and what are you thinking for her?
Well, she's a tough mare, Zardozi. Like, 4th in a Caulfield Cup, 4th in a Melbourne Cup, and 7 runs in the spring, and yet she's come back like we gave her the spring off. She's really that well. So I like the idea of, in the short term, targeting the Australian Cup with Zardozi, and I'd love to see her come back to Sydney and tackle one of the features in the autumn. But we'll just see how she comes through those runs in Melbourne first, and look, she might be a huge spring candidate for us next year, or the latter part of this year, off the back of that, because just turning 4 and just entering the open class racing, I just saw that it was taxing for her in the early part of her campaign, and she got tougher and tougher, and now she's been improved by it. So yeah, we're looking forward to seeing what she does this prep, but I think she's going to be an even better horse in the latter part of the year, and I look forward to seeing what she can do in Melbourne early on as well.
Pericles hasn't won a Group 1 race yet, but he's won over $5 million, and he went out off that 5 Diamonds win. He's been placed a number of times at Group 1 level. Can he finally break through at the highest level come autumn? Which race do you think best suits Pericles?
He can break through. He's had 10 goes at it for coming away without a win in a Group 1, but he's a high-rated customer. He's a classy horse. He's a 5 Diamonds winner, and he gets the opportunity to give the 5 Diamonds a good name, because he can go to plenty of weight for age races and be competitive. He probably just needs to be targeted at those races that are just a tick off, bumping into the absolute best at their peaks, like Via Sistina, when she's ready to go at 2,000. Not going to be. Don't think you'll be seeing Pericles in a race like that, but I think if we find the right race along the way, there'll be something there for him, and that's easier said than done. But he's a phenomenal horse. Like, without winning a Group 1 and winning $5 million prize money is some effort. But look, it could happen for him, and if it's the right handicap, or if it's just the right weight for age race, with the falls at the right time of the year, that'll be his chance. But either way, he's been an amazing soldier for our racing squad, and he seems to have come back in the normal relaxed fashion that he tends to come back in, and we're enjoying what we've seen from him. He actually looks big. He looks like I could have run him a couple more times in the spring just to get him rock hard fit. But no doubt that fitness will come, and we've been delighted to see him. One of those horses that's becoming part of the furniture in the stable. We've been delighted to see him back in the yard.
I run this horse past you know who I'm talking about. He won a spring preview, ran 2nd in an Epsom, 3rd in a Golden Eagle, 4th in a King Charles. Doesn't get a lot of raps.
No.
But Tom Kitten, he is thereabouts, isn't he?
No, he's thereabouts. You're dead right. I mean, turn a couple of those seconds into wins, and he'd have some bank behind him too. But didn't run a bad race in the spring. And look, I think that targeting the Doncaster will be rewarding for Tom Kitten. Nevertheless, wouldn't shock me if we stretched him to 2,000 one more time. I wouldn't give up on that notion with that horse, and Yeah, he's potentially come back better than he was in the spring. I think not entirely dissimilar to Zardozi. I think he probably just took a little bit of time to get back into to get into the groove of racing open class horses, and now that he's had that prep under his belt, he's just a bit more solid than he was, and he's just going about his work with a little bit more zest than he was perhaps this time at the beginning of last preparation. So I like that about that horse. I like the profile that he built last prep, and he has the makings of a future weight for age horse, and a reliable one, that's for sure.
We haven't seen Vilana since his very good third in the Stradbroke last June. Did you deliberately miss the spring with Vilana?
We did, yeah. Look, we brought him home after Queensland, and we weren't entirely happy with the horse. We had him in the paddock for a while, and we just weren't happy enough to bring him back in. We've subsequently had him in and out, done a little bit with him, and we can use a couple of different training tools to try to revitalise him as an older horse. But he had a big couple of weeks there in Brisbane, and just felt that carnival a bit. So he's a chance to get back this autumn. He's no certainty. We might decide just to do a little bit with him, enough to get him up to a certain level and start again by tipping him out. But the next 4 weeks will be crucial for him in making that decision. He certainly looks better for having had the break, and it's just going to be a matter for us to use our judgment, knowing the horse, and to decide whether this will be the carnival for him.
Two horses that haven't made any headlines yet, but they're building really nice profiles, and there's a lot of upside. Pisanello and Chergui. I know they're both in restricted class at the moment, but both of these sprinters have got talent, James.
They do, yeah. Look, I love the way Pisanello was able to not only race through his grades, but travel in doing so. Once he got off those wet tracks that really plagued him the prep before last, subsequent to his Scone win, I was thinking he could really put a few together here. And he just struck bad tracks and sort of had to endure wide runs. Last prep, things went quite nicely. He got the perfect split at Warwick Farm to kick his prep off in style. He took that form to Flemington, the hardest week of all in Melbourne racing for the year is Melbourne Cup week at Flemington, and he won stylishly to win the final event there of the week. And yet his prep wasn't over. He took that to Wollongong to win at Kembla Grange in the support race for the Warra, which is perfect for him because he's just coming through his grades, and he'll get to the harder races soon. But we can take our time with that horse, and we like what we've seen from him. You mentioned another horse, Chergui. Yeah. He's an interesting horse. That son of Lonhro. He's got a little bit more to offer too. We weren't happy to proceed with his last prep, but we've got him back in work now. He's starting to do a little bit more. I think in a bit over a month you'll see him back at the races, and it'll be good to see him tackling the right races on the way through too, because he's got a bit of a future, that horse.
He's a mature horse, very likely race, a lot of upside. There's a lot of depth in those older ranks, but there's no Avilius, there's no Hartnell, there's no Cascadian. You've had so much luck with the imports from Godolphin over the years. Are there any coming through the ranks this autumn?
Look, unfortunately they're not, and they've been sorely missed by our racing team. We can only strategise to continue to breed the best homebreds that we can possibly breed, and maximise their potential. But that has left a big hole in our racing team. And when you list their names, over the last few years, it brings back really fond memories, and horses that were very much so cherished by our racing team, and everyone in a blue jacket would love to see those horses thrive this part of the world, because they certainly settled in and went about their work and worked so well, but became racing stars in the Southern Hemisphere.
Last season you mentioned you had the champion 2-year-old Broadsiding. He was outstanding back end of the season, but at this time of the season he was relatively unheard of. Has Godolphin got a 2-year-old that you think can emerge through the ranks? We've seen some already. I might run a couple past you already. Comedy, the Schnitzel Colt, I thought was really good on debut and ran a trifecta for the stable. And you also got a sable trifecta with a filly called Tempted, who did a great job at Warwick Farm. Are those two among your better 2-year-olds for the season?
Yes, they are. They're right up there, and we've got a small but select band of 2-year-olds that are coming along just the right way, just the way we'd like them to be. There's another colt there called the Aleppo Pine by Blue Point, who was very impressive in Melbourne. He's one and only start, and they're sort of trying to just head their own way. Aleppo Pine's targeting the Blue Diamond early on, and he will run first up next month in the Prelude. Comedy is a chance to run first up in the Canterbury later on this month. As on the same day, the Widden Stakes, we might be able to get tempted to that race. But there's some nice and talented young horses amongst them. We've got a nice Bivouac colt coming through, a nice filly out of Immersement who's showing ability. So there's a few that are coming through, and the next 3 weeks will be a really vital period of time for those 2-year-olds as they build a bit of a base as their assault on the feature races in Sydney for the 2-year-olds, and to set up, the clashes with, the more well-performed horses from other stables that are going to come together in these good races in the next few weeks.
What about Chergui, who's the half to Elise and Astern, and ran well on debut, bumped into the Golden Slipper favourite Peloton, but he didn't shirk his task. Do you rate him amongst a better class?
I do rate that horse. We'll take him along nicely. We might duck back to Melbourne if it suits us. There's a race down there called the Showdown that gets put on for Vobis horses.
It's $1 million race, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's a lucrative race, and that might just give him a little bit more opportunity to go back and forth between the Melbourne base and the Sydney one. And yet he's a talented horse. The race rated well and has already had subsequent winners from it. So it'd be no shock to me to see the winner continue to train on. And our horse did knock up late. He had improvement in him. He had very soft trials in the lead up to that, and I think that probably told in the finish. But it's going to be difficult to turn the tables on the winner. But I think that race can be really trusted going forward.
Yeah, I agree. We've gone through a fair bit there. There's a lot of depth and quality for Godolphin come autumn, but if there's one horse for our viewers to watch out for in the Royal Blue, from James Cummings' opinion, can you nominate one?
I think you could keep an eye on Zardozi this preparation.
Thanks so much, James Cummings.
Thanks, Ray.